back in my lair once more. Hello everyone, my name is Cinder, and welcome to part 2 of my redesigns and reimaginings of Sonic characters. Now before we get started, keep in mind that these are my takes, and this is just what I've come up with. You can do your own redesigns if you'd like to, and there's other redesigns out there. But just remember this is for fun, and nothing really else. I'm not here to slander anybody or the artists. Now let's get into it. Starting off with Rouge the Bat. Fun little fact about me is that I never actually knew who Rouge was. She didn't appear in any of the old shows that I mentioned I watched the previous episode, at least not to my knowledge, but I do recall knowing her from 2 different ways online. One of which was Sonic X that I recently watched and I really like her character in. The other was from the Sonic Zombie Origin series. And for those of you who don't know what that is, let me play a clip for you.
What in the world could that have possibly been?
It sounds like me, it is a zombie, but the zombie is not real. But if there are more zombies, I'm going to have to go outside and check because there might be more outside.
Nothing makes me feel older than realizing that this is 10 years old and this is what I watched as a literal child. I was 8 when this came out. Moving on. When learning about Rouge, I actually had no idea she was a jewel thief. Nothing about her screamed, "I am a jewel thief." So, what I wanted to do was I wanted to incorporate more of that jewel thief design into her style. I took some inspo from Sonic Prime and gave her more of a suit-like outfit. And for her hands, I actually gave her black gloves and put some blue diamonds on it. When I first saw Rouge, I really liked her color palette. It was really cute and I really liked it a lot. The only thing about her design that threw me off was the fact that she had blue eyeshadow. It would always catch my attention that I'd almost pay no attention to the rest of her design. So I wanted to incorporate more blue in her design, adding it on the little cuffs and edges of her boots and her gloves. I also added a little beauty mark as a little bit of flair to her character, and I changed her pink lipstick to blue. And like I said last video, I'm not at all adding that skin tone human flesh color on her body. I know Rouge is one of the most fan-servicey characters, and I wanted to take that away from her. So I replaced all of the fleshy parts with fur. That sounds cursed now that I'm saying it, but we're not going to do a retake. I added a diamond on her neck and a diamond-shaped zipper on her top. I also made her tail white because I could never tell if it was white naturally or if it was black because she tucked it into her suit. In the end, I really liked her design, and I especially loved how all the colors came out. Out of everybody, Rouge's design is possibly my favorite. Moving on to Blaze. I'm gonna be honest, I also did not know who Blaze was. For a lot of these characters, I didn't really know who they were. But I actually have a funny story about Blaze. Back when I was a child in elementary school, I was taking a media class. It was more so like a film class, I'm gonna be honest. You essentially just had to look at media and just make stop-motion animations or just draw something. And when I was around this age, I was a big Pokemon fan, so I was looking around the internet trying to find Pokemon stuff to do. I vividly remember seeing a picture of Blaze and needing to stop to look at it to think, what is this? It only took me a minute to look at the gem on her forehead to think, oh, Espeon from Pokemon. I never really rendered that this could be a Sonic character because I'd only ever thought Sonic characters could be certain colors, or they couldn't really be other animals like cats. So I just had it in my head that she was just an Espeon. What threw me off with her design was the fact that it looked like she was wearing some sort of white onesie with white fluffy cuffs. I didn't really like this fact, so I was looking around for other references. I ended up finding Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog game and used her sprite from that game as inspiration. I initially wanted to add jewelry to her ears to add to that princess vibe, but I felt like it would clog up her design a little too much, so I added just a golden cuff on her tail and golden cuff as a hair tie. I added red jewels on the tail cuff to mimic her gem on her forehead. I also added red eyeliner underneath her eyes to make it pop out a little bit more. I don't have much else to say about Blaze, honestly. I do have a little bit of an idea that I want to use for a future AU of mine, so I'm just going to share a little bit of it. I'm not going to bring up Silver, but we'll talk about him in a minute. I feel like Blaze should have maybe stayed in her own dimension, or her dimension should have been tied to Sonic's world in some way. It would have been a nice touch, and she would have actually remembered who he was, instead of the fact that she somehow forgot who he was due to amnesia. If the events of 06 did in fact happen, I feel like it would have been a nicer touch if Blaze somehow got caught up in the mix rather than already being there. It would have been nice to see that something that affecting Silver would have also affected her and Sonic at the same time, and that she'd intervene to help out an old friend. I would imagine that she would learn a thing or two from Sonic, and would still seal Iblis within herself. She would eventually go back to her own dimension, but now she would have an overwhelming sense of power. I feel like it would be nice to see her struggle with that power and to see what she would do with it, to see how she would overcome it and stuff. That's all that I have to say about Blaze. I really like how her design came out, and although I did kind of forget to render her body, I like how everything else came out, how the jewelry and how the clothing came out as well. And next we have Silver. I know my homie out there is watching this and he's probably going to be excited, so I'm going to talk about him generously. Starting off with some background, I also didn't know who Silver was, shocker. But the funny thing was, I didn't know his personality either when I first discovered him, all in thanks to a certain animation. So I grew up with the thought that Silver was just like a really rude and immature person. But then my friend explained to me that that was in fact not the case, and he was not a horrible person at all. I actually struggled with drawing his little quills, I guess. I don't know what to call these. I just call it his weed, because look at it, it looks like weed. I won't show a picture here, but I initially was about to give him a low ponytail with his quills, but I decided against it because I just wanted to give him off as he was naturally. I tried to go for a cyberpunk vibe because he does live in the distant future, and I learned from the comics that he is also an agent, Agent Ace, which is why I wrote the A-Ace on the little suspender of his. I just wanted to pay a little homage to that, because I really like that fact. I did not know that at all in the slightest, so when I found that out, that was a big surprise, and I really like that surprise. I also went a little hard on his eyeliner, and I gave him the same treatment that I did with Blaze by giving him an additional piece of eyeliner, which you'll see in the end, but I wanted to make it pop out a little bit more. A little detail I also did on his eyes was that I gave his eyes a white pupil instead of a black one. I don't know why I felt the need to do this, but I felt like it would make more sense considering his powers do have something to do with the mind, and it would affect how his eyes look, because, you know, the eyeballs be attached to your brain. Cyberpunk Edgerunners was definitely an inspiration for Silver's design, since I tried to do a more dystopian kind of cyberpunk aesthetic, but I also tried to keep it the cool kind of cyberpunk without going overboard. While doing my research for Silver, I came across another character, Gold the Tenric. I still have some research to do on her, but when I took a look at her wiki, I learned that she and Silver had a bit of a brother-sister dynamic, and immediately I was in love with this dynamic. So much so I have a take on it for my own AU. Now if you're a big fan of the lore, lower your expectations because I might fumble here. Despite Gold's story, which I've read a little bit about, I think it could possibly do their characters wonders if Silver and Gold lived in the same world, if they both had to fight Iblis and such instead of Blaze and Silver. Call me morbid, but the idea that Silver lives in such a harsh world and has to take care of someone who's been hurt by that world feels much more fitting than a princess coming out of nowhere to assist this random hedgehog in stopping a fire monster. I'm aware many love the Sylvaise duo, but I gotta hand it to the brother-sister dynamic. Maybe it's because the names are literally Silver and Gold, or it's just because I really like brother and sister dynamics. Probably talk about them more if I ever draw Gold, but I'd really like to see Silver be forced to grow up in order to protect Gold, and I feel like it would do wonders for his character. I'm aware his gloves are supposed to be white with the cyan rings, but I couldn't help myself and I had to pay a little homage to his agent suit, which involves this little hand pattern. And just like Rouge, I also removed the fleshy coloring and replaced it with white. Personally, I'm glad that I made that change because his character now looks much more appealing. I did end up having a moment of consideration, wondering if I should make his nose black or pink. I don't know why I wanted to make it pink, I just felt like it would be a cute touch, but I took it back and immediately wanted his nose to be black, because I just figured it looked better and I shouldn't change it. But yes, that is Silver. I really like how he came out, and out of everybody, he has to be my favorite. And finally, we have Knuckles. I'm gonna be honest, Knuckles was a bit of a challenge, especially because I had a certain idea of how I wanted to draw him, but I didn't have much to go off of, just like Tails and Sonic. I was glad I rewatched the Sonic 2 movie, as I likely wouldn't have been able to finish this had I not. I took a photo of his father and decided to add his mask and poncho onto Knuckles. I would imagine that at some point, or somehow, Knuckles would have eventually gotten his father's poncho and would have held on to it as something to remember him by. I also straightened out his tail a little bit because I found his bent tail a little odd looking. Surprisingly, I actually knew who Knuckles was. I can't remember from what movie or show or series that it was, but I definitely remember who he was. He was not a character I would easily forget. Especially because red was my favorite color, and I don't know, he was just memorable at the time. I always thought that he was wearing mittens, but then looking at the Sonic 2 movie and getting a closer look at his gloves, I realized that they're boxing gloves, not really mittens. I don't know why I would assume he was wearing like knitted mittens, but somehow I did. I ended up putting his quills into a bit of a high ponytail, but leaving the rest down. I also learned that while making this and editing this footage, that not only do echidnas have no visible ears, hence why Knuckles never has his ears shown, but echidnas also have essentially backwards facing feet. Another fun little fact is that I did not know what the hell an echidna was. I also didn't know what hedgehogs were. When I was getting into Sonic, you have to understand, I knew mostly about bats. Bats were my main interest when I was a kid. It was not these quilly little guys. So when I heard hedgehog and echidna, I just assumed it was like a regional variant of a porcupine, or just a miniature porcupine. I had no idea what these were. I didn't really have access to like the internet at this time, so I couldn't just look it up. The most I could look up were like MMD dance videos, but that was about it. I eventually tried to adjust his face because something about the proportions from his eyes to his head just felt off. I could never find a good reference for it. His eyes always seemed too big or too small compared to his head. So I just had to move it around and hope for the best. It probably turned out a little wonky because that's how it seems to me, but I'm not really going to change it now. I actually like how his tail came out, especially because it just looks more natural compared to how bendy and curvy it used to be. And because it was so bendy, I just always assumed that he had a broken tail. I could never tell you why, but I just assumed that this guy's tail was broken 24/7 and he refused to go to the hospital. I ended up caving and had to do the flesh color around his mouth because I couldn't really find a good substitute to do for it. But that is it, and here is Knuckles. Howdy! If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching these. These were really fun to do, and I'm actually excited to do more for the future. As I said I would do requests, and some of the characters that were requested for the next video were Infinite, Tangle, and Whisper. I'm also going to add Vanilla and Cream for my next episode as my 2 cents for that video. I hope I did these characters justice with their redesigns. This is also kind of intent with my AU, but I'm really glad how they came out, and I tried to stick to as many different variants of themselves as possible throughout the franchise. I'm now off to go and turn myself into a burrito and listen to music for the next 10 hours. Goodbye!